They told me I couldn't celebrate my culture right in my own yard. So I called their bluff and invited the mayor instead. What happened next? Shook the entire neighborhood. If you've ever had to stand up for what's right, especially against power-hungry HOA bullies, this story is for you. Stick around because what started as a quiet backyard event turned into a showdown that made headlines. Before we jump in, hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life neighborhood drama, and let me know in the comments, have you ever had to fight your HOA? The mayor stood on my front lawn, microphone in hand, smiling wide as a crowd of over 200 people clapped and danced to the beat of our drums. Bright-colored canopies lined the yard. The air smelled of spices and grilled food, and children in traditional clothes ran barefoot through the grass. Behind the mayor, a banner flapped proudly in the breeze. Spring Unity Festival, celebrating culture, community, and kindness. I stood beside her, barely holding back tears. Just 1 week earlier, this very celebration had been banned by our homeowners association. Not postponed, not relocated, flat out banned. They claimed it didn't align with the neighborhood aesthetic, and said the drumming might be uncomfortable for some residents. But here we were, on the same patch of lawn they tried to silence, hosting the biggest cultural event the neighborhood had ever seen, and the mayor herself was our guest of honor. The HOA president, Mr. Kingsley, stood 3 houses down on his porch, arms folded, face so red you'd think he'd swallowed a hornet. He hadn't said a word yet, but I saw it in his eyes. He had no idea how this happened, and he definitely didn't see what was coming next. But before we get to that wild Saturday, let me take you back to where it all started, before the mayor, before the drama, before the drums. Just a girl, a dream, and a neighborhood that wasn't ready. My name is Ava Daniels. I've lived in Willow Creek Estates for 8 years. It's a peaceful place, neatly trimmed hedges, pastel-colored homes, quiet streets where neighbors wave politely but don't linger too long in conversation. If I had to sum it up, I'd say Willow Creek was designed for calm, not culture. Which made it strange, because this was the very place I chose to raise my daughter, Lila, with the traditions my grandmother passed down to me from her Caribbean roots. Lila was 10 now, smart, spirited, and proud of her heritage. Every spring, we held a small celebration in our backyard. Just us, a few friends, some food, music, and colorful decorations. We'd light candles in remembrance of our ancestors, dance a little, and share stories late into the evening. It wasn't loud or wild, just joyful. For years, no one seemed to mind. But this year, everything changed. I'd gotten the idea to make the celebration a bit bigger, just a little. A community event where people could experience different cultures through food, dance, and storytelling. I thought it would be beautiful. I called it the Spring Unity Festival, sent out handmade flyers, and even created a website. Neighbors seemed interested. Some emailed me, offering to bring dishes from their heritage: Vietnamese spring rolls, Ethiopian injera, Italian biscotti. I was moved. Felt like something truly special was about to bloom here. Even Mr. Delgado, our reclusive next-door neighbor, asked if he could read a poem in Spanish during the storytelling hour. But when I submitted the event form to the HOA for approval, things got tense. At first, I heard nothing. A week passed. Then, too, I sent follow-up emails. Still nothing. So I decided to attend the next HOA meeting in person. That's when I learned that the board had already voted unanimously to deny the event. Their reason? Too disruptive. I remember sitting in that beige conference room, staring at the printed agenda while the board moved on to discuss hedge heights and approved garage paint colors. I raised my hand. I asked calmly if they could explain. Mr. Kingsley adjusted his glasses and said, "It's not personal, Ava. We just don't think an event of that nature fits the character of Willow Creek." That nature. That character. It was the way he said it. Like culture was something to be hidden. Like joy needed to be approved. I felt the sting behind my eyes, but I didn't let them see it. I left quietly, but I knew something had shifted inside me. Lila asked that night if we were still going to have the festival. I told her we might have to change the plan a little. I spent the next 2 days calling local parks, churches, even community centers to find another venue. Everything was either too expensive, already booked, or unwilling to host a private cultural event without a long approval process. Then came the message that sparked it all. An email from a woman named Mrs. Rose Harper. She introduced herself as a cultural liaison in the mayor's office. Someone had forwarded her our event flyer, and she was impressed. She wanted to know if we needed help bringing the festival to life. At first, I thought it was spam, but she followed up with a phone call. She had the kind of voice that reminded me of my grandmother, warm but firm. I told her everything. The HOA's rejection, the neighborhood politics, my daughter's disappointment, and the fear I felt about pushing back. She said, "Ava, you are not alone. What you're doing matters. Let us support you." Within 2 days, she arranged a meeting with someone even I didn't expect, the mayor herself, Veronica Lane. Mayor Lane was different. She didn't speak in polished phrases or toss around big promises. She listened, really listened. She asked about our family, our culture, our goals for the event. Then she said something I'll never forget. "If your HOA doesn't see the value in this, then it's time the rest of the city does. And I'd be proud to attend." That's when the plan really started. We moved the celebration back to my lawn where it always belonged. But this time we made it bigger. We printed banners. We brought in folding chairs, set up speakers, rented portable restrooms, and arranged parking through a neighbor who owned a nearby vacant lot. Word spread fast. But we kept the mayor's appearance quiet. Only a few people knew. We didn't want the HOA interfering before the big day. Still, they caught wind something was up. 2 days before the event, I received a notice on my porch hand-delivered by Mr. Kingsley himself. It said that hosting an unauthorized gathering of this size was a violation of the HOA charter and could result in a $5,000 fine. I asked him if he was serious. He didn't blink. "Absolutely. And if you don't comply, we'll be forced to escalate the matter." I didn't say a word. Just closed the door. That night, I sat in my living room staring at the paper. My hands shook. I thought about canceling. About just making cupcakes with Lila and dancing in the kitchen like we used to. Maybe it wasn't worth the stress. But then Lila came in holding a dress she'd picked out for the festival, a bright orange wrap with golden beads she helped sew onto the hem. She asked, "Mom, are we still doing the dance circle this year?" Mr. Delgado said he's been practicing. I swallowed hard. "Yes," I said. "We are." The next morning, I called Mrs. Harper and told her everything. The warning, the fine, the threat. She was quiet. Then she simply said, "Don't worry, Ava. Let them show their hand. We're ready." I didn't know exactly what she meant, but I trusted her. Then on the morning of the festival, just as I was placing candles on the lawn, a black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Mayor Veronica Lane in a powder blue dress and sunglasses. She smiled, walked over, and said, "Shall we make some history?" The crowd hadn't even fully gathered yet. Music hadn't started. But in that one moment, I knew everything had already changed. Then, just as the microphone was being set up and the smell of curry and cornbread began wafting through the air, something happened. A police cruiser pulled up. 2 officers stepped out. Mr. Kingsley was behind them, and he was holding a clipboard. The energy on the lawn froze. You could feel it like a cold breeze sweeping through warm air. Music faltered. Conversations hushed. Lila clutched my hand and I saw Mr. Delgado lower his poem book, his face suddenly tense. Mr. Kingsley walked with stiff, heavy steps toward the mayor and me, flanked by the 2 uniformed officers. His clipboard was tucked tightly under one arm like it held the Constitution itself. The crowd parted as he approached, and I could feel the weight of 200 eyes watching. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice tight with false politeness. "Ms. Daniels, you've been issued a cease and desist." He handed me a paper with a big red stamp at the top. "Violation of HOA ordinances," he continued. "Unapproved use of residential property for a public event, noise disturbance, traffic obstruction. The fine is now at $7,500, and you are hereby ordered to disband this gathering immediately." There was a pause. Then, Mayor Lane stepped forward. "Mr. Kingsley, is it?" she asked calmly. His chest puffed slightly. "Yes, President of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association." "Well," the mayor said, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "You may not have recognized me. Veronica Lane, Mayor of Clearwater." Mr. Kingsley froze. "And as the invited guest of Ms. Daniels," she continued, her voice steady but firm, "I can assure you that this gathering is both peaceful and permitted, under the city's Civic Engagement Clause. The officers behind you are here to ensure safety, not to enforce your HOA technicalities. Unless you'd like to challenge city jurisdiction." Mr. Kingsley's face lost its color. One of the officers glanced at her, nodded slightly, and said, That's correct, ma'am. We're not here to shut anything down. A murmur of relief swept through the crowd. I glanced at Lila, whose mouth had dropped open. Her eyes sparkled with something I hadn't seen in days. Pride. Still, Mr. Kingsley wasn't finished. He tried to recover, flipping through his clipboard and muttering something about bylaws and precedent, but it was clear he had lost control of the moment. The mayor gave him a polite smile and turned her attention to the microphone now waiting by the garden arch. "Shall we begin the festivities?" she asked. And just like that, the tension lifted. Children raced back toward the craft tables. A burst of music from the steel drums picked up again, followed by cheers. Mr. Kingsley remained in place for a second longer, then turned on his heel and stormed back to his house, the officers trailing quietly behind. But that wasn't the last we'd hear from him. As the celebration bloomed, I slipped into host mode, making sure the Caribbean dishes stayed warm, checking on performers and greeting neighbors as they arrived. To my surprise, more people came than I expected. Families I hadn't spoken to in years showed up with folding chairs. Mr. Delgado's poetry reading drew a small crowd who clapped with surprising enthusiasm. A woman I barely knew brought homemade dumplings and offered free henna art under a cherry blossom tree. It felt magical. Mayor Lane gave a brief speech about the importance of community-led events and the value of cultural pride, then joined us for the traditional dance circle. Lila took the lead, spinning gracefully in her orange dress, drawing applause from the audience. My eyes welled up more than once. But around mid-afternoon, something odd happened. A man with a camera appeared near the sidewalk. Then another. Then two more, clearly reporters. I hadn't invited the press. At first, I thought maybe the mayor had tipped them off. But then a woman from the local paper approached me with a strange question. "Hi, Ms. Daniels. I heard the HOA filed a complaint against you for illegally charging admission to a private event. Care to comment?" "What?" I blinked. "There's no admission. Everything here is free." She looked puzzled. "That's what I thought. But the HOA told us you were collecting money, violating zoning laws, holding an unlicensed business event on residential property." My stomach turned. I hadn't collected a cent from anyone. All the food was donated, the performers were volunteers. If anything, I'd paid out of pocket. I glanced toward Mr. Kingsley's house, but the blinds were tightly shut. He was trying something else now, turning public opinion against me. And this time he was using the media. But I wasn't alone. The mayor's assistant, Mrs. Harper, stepped in quickly and clarified the situation to the reporters. She even handed out copies of the city's support letter and permits. One journalist looked downright embarrassed for having asked. Still, something felt off. That night, after the festival ended and the last of the chairs were folded away, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and Lila dozing next to me. My heart was full, but something tugged at my mind. Why had Mr. Kingsley gone so far? Why did he care so much about one community celebration? It wasn't just about noise or bylaws. It felt deeper, more personal. The next morning, I got my answer. I woke up to a loud knock on the door. Still in my robe, I opened it and found a plain manila envelope sitting on my welcome mat. Inside was a printout of an anonymous email sent to the HOA board members. The subject line read, "The real reason Ava Daniels can't be trusted in Willow Creek." And attached beneath it were photos of me from years ago. Out of context. Some from a protest. Others from community organizing events. Old social media posts. Even one blurry photo of me hugging someone at a neighborhood rally. It was a smear campaign. And someone inside the HOA was behind it. I stared at the photos in the envelope, my fingers trembling. Some were printed on cheap paper, some highlighted in yellow. A few had captions scribbled in red ink, "Political agitator. Community disruptor. Brings outsiders into the neighborhood." One even had a circle drawn around my face like I was a suspect in a crime. The manila envelope had no return address. No signature. Just the ugly message it carried. "You don't belong here." My chest tightened. I sat on the edge of my couch, blinking at the photos as if they would explain themselves. These weren't secret images, they were just old. Years ago, I helped organize peaceful marches for education reform. I volunteered in city council campaigns. I hosted potlucks for immigrants and refugees trying to adjust to life in Clearwater. It was work I was proud of. But now, twisted and stripped of context, it looked like a hit piece. My first instinct was to protect Lila. She was upstairs brushing her teeth, humming the same tune from the festival. Still happy. Still unaware. I gathered the photos, stuffed them back into the envelope, and hid it in my closet. Then I called Mrs. Harper. She answered on the second ring. I explained what had happened, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't sound shocked. Concerned, yes, but not surprised. They're trying to make you the problem, she said. They know they can't win in public, so now they're trying to paint you as a threat. But why? I whispered. Why does this matter so much to them? There was a pause. Some people feel entitled to decide what belongs, she said. And more importantly, who belongs? You shook something loose, Ava. And they don't like it. That evening, Mayor Lane called me personally. We're looking into where the email originated, she said. My team is already on it. If it was sent from someone on the HOA board, we'll know. But I already had a strong guess. Mr. Kingsley. He had been growing more agitated with each passing day. And after the way he marched onto my lawn with officers in tow only to be publicly corrected by the mayor, I knew his ego had taken a hit. Badly. But he wasn't acting alone. At the next HOA meeting, I sat quietly in the back, listening as Mr. Kingsley proposed a new resolution. Stricter guidelines for public gatherings, mandatory board approval for any non-traditional event, and a clause banning political guests on private lawns during neighborhood functions. My heart sank. This wasn't about noise. It wasn't even about culture. It was about control. Several board members nodded along. A few looked uncomfortable. One woman, Ms. Tran, glanced back at me with what looked like regret in her eyes. Then something unexpected happened. Before Mr. Kingsley could call a vote, Ms. Tran raised her hand. I think we should pause, she said. Maybe even reconsider this proposal. Kingsley looked like she'd slapped him. Why? He asked coldly. Because I was at Ava's event, she said quietly. And it was beautiful. People were smiling, sharing. My kids learned more in 2 hours than they've ever gotten from our neighborhood newsletter. And I don't think we should respond to something good with punishment. Silence swept the room. Then another voice spoke up. Mr. Patel, who'd never said much in these meetings, added, I second that. We always say we want more community engagement, and then the moment someone actually does it, we shut it down. Why? Kingsley fumed. Because it was unauthorized. It violated our rules. But the mayor was there, Patel countered. Shouldn't that mean something? Mr. Kingsley abruptly ended the meeting without a vote. I walked out quietly, heart racing. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. But the next morning, things escalated again. I stepped outside to check the mail and stopped short. Someone had spray-painted my garage door. The words were ugly. Go back where you came from. It felt like ice poured down my spine. I stood there frozen, the spray paint dripping in the morning sun. Lila hadn't seen it yet. Thank God. I quickly called the police, then texted Mrs. Harper, then called my friend Mia from across town. She told me she'd drive over immediately and bring cleaning supplies. When the officer arrived, he took photos, asked questions, and offered a sympathetic nod. We'll file a report, he said. But unless someone saw something or you have a camera, these cases are hard to follow up on. I looked at my flower bed. Someone had trampled the marigolds. Mrs. Harper called back, her voice more urgent than usual. This is exactly why we need to move faster. Whoever's behind this isn't just trying to silence you, they're trying to scare you. I'm not scared, I said, but my voice cracked when I said it. Because I was scared. Not just for myself, but for Lila. For the neighbors who had shown up to support us. For the young girl next door who told me at the festival she wanted to learn how to make jollof rice like the lady with the blue scarf. But it didn't stop there. That night, my power went out. Only my house. The entire block was lit, but mine was pitch black. The electric company said someone had tampered with the outside fuse box. Do you want us to send someone to inspect it? The rep asked. Yes, I said. Please. As soon as possible. While I waited, I lit candles, made tea with the gas stove, and tried to calm Lila, who was asking why her night light wasn't working. I didn't have an answer I liked. When Mia arrived with cleaning supplies, we worked in silence, scrubbing the hateful message off my garage. The paint came off in streaks, but the words stayed in my head. Over and over again. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to sit and wait for the next attack. I was going to fight back, but not with more hate. With light. The same kind of light that brought everyone together at the Spring Unity Festival. That day, I launched a petition. Simple title, Let Culture Live in Willow Creek. I shared the story, the HOA shutdown, the photos, the mayor's support, and now the graffiti and threats. Within 48 hours, it had over 3,000 signatures. Local reporters picked it up. TV stations called for interviews. But just when it seemed like support was pouring in from every corner of Clearwater, something new surfaced. An anonymous email leak. Screenshots from an internal HOA group chat. Comments that said things like, "She's turning our neighborhood into a circus. She'll invite more politicians next time." I stared at the leaked messages on my phone, my thumb frozen over the screen. That last line, "I heard she's trying to run for office herself," it rattled something deep inside me. At first, I wanted to laugh. Me? Run for office? I was just a single mom who wanted to celebrate her culture and teach her daughter to be proud of where she came from. But the more I thought about it, the more the idea stuck in my head. Maybe they were afraid because they knew what I stood for. And maybe they should be. Still, right now wasn't the time for politics. I had a home to protect, a daughter to raise, and a neighborhood divided down the middle. That same day, I got a message from Ms. Tran. She invited me to coffee at a small cafe just outside Willow Creek. Neutral ground. She looked nervous when she arrived, holding a small notebook and glancing around before sitting. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "About everything. The vote, the backlash, the garage. I didn't vote for that resolution, Ava. I promise." But I wasn't brave enough to speak louder. "And now, I think you should know something." She opened her notebook. Inside were notes, dates, names, even quotes taken from private HOA discussions. "I don't agree with how Kingsley's been handling this. Especially now that he's pushing for what he's calling a neighborhood purity clause." My eyebrows shot up. What? He wants to pass a bylaw that lets the HOA reject certain home activities, decorations, or gatherings if they're deemed non-aligned with community values. But he's not defining what those values are. He's being vague on purpose. I sat back, heart thudding. That wasn't just about me. That could affect anyone, any family that didn't fit his narrow vision of who belonged in Willow Creek. He's also been meeting privately with 2 board members, Mr. Lowry and Ms. Baines, she continued. "And I think they're trying to find a way to have you removed." My breath caught. "Removed how?" "Some clause in the HOA charter about community disruption and lowering property values. They want to build a case. That's why the smear campaign started. This wasn't just about a festival anymore. This was war." When I got home, I couldn't sit still. I paced the living room, cleaned the counters twice, and opened every window in the house just to let in some air. I knew I had to do something. So that night, I went live on Facebook. I hadn't planned it. I didn't write a script. I just sat in front of my laptop, heart pounding, and spoke. "I'm not a politician," I said. "I'm a mother. I'm a neighbor. I'm someone who believed that celebrating culture could bring people together, not tear them apart. But now I'm being targeted for trying to do something good. And I won't stay silent anymore." I showed the garage photo. I read one of the hate messages. I explained the new HOA bylaw proposal. And then I asked for help. Help from neighbors. Help from friends. Help from anyone who believed that neighborhoods should be about community, not control. The video went viral. By morning, over 100,000 views. People from all across Clearwater and even outside the state started messaging me. Teachers, artists, moms, small business owners, a retired judge. And then came the one message that changed everything. It was from a woman named Brianna Gray, civil rights attorney, former city housing commissioner. She wrote, "Your HOA may be violating the Fair Housing Act. I'd like to meet." When we met the next day, Brianna showed up with a briefcase and a fire in her eyes. She had already read through Willow Creek's HOA bylaws and found multiple loopholes and more than a few potential legal violations. "They're selectively enforcing policies," she said, flipping through her notes. "And they're targeting you based on culture. That's discrimination, Ava. You've got a case. A strong one." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Sue the HOA? The idea scared me. But so did doing nothing. "What would that look like?" I asked. "Simple," she said. "We file a cease and desist on their latest proposal. We collect testimony from neighbors who support you. We get a restraining order on any further fines. And then we make it public." That last part made me pause. "Go public?" Again, Brianna smiled. "We don't fight hate with silence. We fight it with light." That night, I called Mia, Mr. Delgado, Ms. Tran, and a few others from the neighborhood who had attended the festival. Every single one of them agreed to speak out. But as I was printing documents for the meeting with Brianna the next day, something happened. A loud knock at my front door. 3 rapid pounds. I opened it and found Lila's favorite doll lying on the welcome mat. The head was missing. Next to it was a note, written in sharp black marker on ripped cardboard. End this or we end you. I slammed the door shut and locked it 3 times. My hands were shaking. I sat on the floor and pulled Lila close to me. I didn't tell her what it said, just held her while she asked why I was crying. I didn't know what scared me more, that someone would threaten a child's toy, or that I now knew exactly who they were targeting next. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my daughter, and that changed everything. The morning after the threat, I didn't send Lila to school. I told her it was a mental health day, and we stayed curled up on the couch watching cartoons while my mind raced. Every creak of the house made me look over my shoulder. I couldn't stop replaying the image of her doll limp, beheaded, tossed like trash. It wasn't just a message anymore. It was a warning, and it was working. But instead of backing down, it lit something fierce in me. They weren't just trying to silence a celebration anymore. They were trying to scare a child into silence. That wasn't just evil, it was cowardly. Later that day, I met with Brianna again. Her calm energy grounded me. We can file for an emergency protective order today, she said. We'll also add the threat to our civil suit against the HOA. They're not going to see this coming. I nodded. Let's do it. We filed the paperwork that afternoon. Then Brianna told me about the press conference. I've already spoken with local stations, she said. They want your story, but not just the festival, everything. The emails, the graffiti, the attack on your home. If you're willing, we can go live in front of City Hall tomorrow. I hesitated. Going public meant opening ourselves up to more danger. But I also knew something deeper. If we didn't take a stand now, the next family wouldn't even get the chance. So I agreed. That night, I told Lila the truth, well, most of it. I said that some people didn't like how we celebrated, and they were trying to stop us from being who we were. She sat with that for a moment, then looked at me and said, "But I liked the drums, and the dancing." And everyone was smiling. I smiled. Me too. Then she added, "Can I come to the press thing with you?" I kissed her forehead. "We'll see, baby. We'll see." The next morning, we arrived early at City Hall. The mayor met me out front, along with Brianna and a line of supporters from Willow Creek holding signs, "Culture is not a crime, unity not uniformity, let Ava be." TV cameras were already there. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped up to the mic with a shaking hand, but a steady voice. "My name is Ava Daniels. I'm a mom, a neighbor, and a proud part of Clearwater. I threw a community festival to celebrate culture, and I was targeted. Not just fined, not just harassed, but threatened. My child was targeted, my home vandalized, and it all started because I wanted to share joy." I paused, heart pounding. This isn't just about one event. It's about every person who's been told they don't belong because of who they are or where they're from. It's about control masked as policy. And I'm here to say no more. The crowd erupted in cheers. Afterward, reporters swarmed, neighbors hugged me, and one elderly woman I'd never met said, "You remind me of Rosa Parks. Small frame, big heart." I laughed, but inside I was shaking, because I knew something was still coming. And I was right. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Daniels," a man's voice said. "Yes. This is Officer Kelton with Clearwater PD. We need to inform you that your name has been submitted in a formal complaint by the Willow Creek HOA for inciting civil unrest and provoking neighborhood hostility. They're requesting an injunction to remove you from the HOA registry." I blinked. "Remove me? From my own neighborhood?" "Yes, ma'am. You'll be served a formal hearing notice within the week. I'm just calling to inform you." The call ended. I sat in stunned silence. They were trying to evict me. Not just silence me. Erase me. I called Brianna immediately. "They're bluffing," she said, but I could hear the tension in her voice. "But we need to be ready." This just became a full-blown legal fight. The next day, the hearing notice was hand-delivered. HOA v. Ava Daniels. Special Tribunal to review breach of community standards. I had 10 days. 10 days to prepare for a tribunal I never asked for. But then something happened that made the neighborhood catch its breath. Ms. Tran resigned from the HOA board. She posted a long message on the neighborhood forum publicly condemning the board's actions and calling the campaign against me an abuse of power and a violation of everything this community claims to stand for. That same day, Mr. Patel and 2 other members followed her lead and quit as well. The board was unraveling. But Kingsley wasn't done yet. On the 8th day before my hearing, as I was setting out recycling bins, I saw a notice taped to my front window. HOA security camera proposal, vote pending. The document proposed installing 15 surveillance cameras across Willow Creek, including one facing my property for safety and monitoring purposes. I tore the paper down and stormed back inside. He wasn't just trying to remove me. He wanted to watch me. Brianna called an emergency meeting with city officials that night. He's acting like this is his kingdom, she said. But it's not. And tomorrow we push back. And push we did. The very next morning, Brianna filed a formal injunction against the HOA, citing civil rights violations, targeted harassment, and abuse of power. But the wildest moment came just hours later. I was baking banana bread when I heard a knock. I opened the door and nearly dropped the pan. Standing there on my porch was a man in a suit. He extended a hand. "Ms. Daniels," he said. "My name is Stephen Marlowe. I represent the Clearwater Investigative News Bureau. We've been looking into your HOA for a while now." I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Because Mr. Kingsley isn't who he says he is. And we think you're going to want to hear what we found." Stephen Marlowe stepped into my living room, placed a thick folder on my coffee table, and opened it like he was revealing buried treasure. "This," he said, flipping to the first page, "is your HOA president's resume. The one he submitted to the state when Willow Creek's HOA became incorporated 10 years ago. Problem is it's fake." I leaned in, squinting at the documents. "What do you mean fake?" "False credentials. Bogus licensing. Turns out Mr. Gregory Kingsley isn't even his real name. His legal name is Jonathan Marks, and he's been using an alias since a fraud conviction from back in New Jersey. Embezzlement. HOA related too." My stomach dropped. "You're serious?" "Oh, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't," Marlowe said. "Our bureau's been tracking him for years. He bounces from HOA to HOA, gets elected as president, and then slowly changes the rules. Makes himself untouchable. And usually by the time anyone catches on, he's already transferred neighborhood funds to a shell company and vanished." My mouth went dry. "Is that what he's doing here?" "Almost definitely. He's already filed paperwork to move money from Willow Creek's reserve account to a beautification project, some company based in Nevada that doesn't even have a website." I stood up stunned. "We have to tell someone. The city, the news, everyone." Marlowe held up a hand. "Already in motion. But we need a big spark to light the fire. Something loud. Something public. And I think your hearing is the perfect place." I blinked. "You want me to expose him during the tribunal?" "Exactly. On record. Under oath. We'll handle the rest." I had never done anything like this in my life. But the moment he left, the pieces started falling into place in my mind like dominoes. Everything made sense now: why Kingsley had gone so hard after me, why he was desperate to silence the festival, the smear campaign, the threats. He was trying to stir up enough chaos to distract from the real crime. And I had just become his biggest threat. The day of the hearing arrived like a thundercloud. It was held in the community clubhouse, the very place where the Spring Unity Festival was denied. Rows of chairs had been set up and nearly every seat was full. Neighbors I hadn't seen in months. Reporters. Even Mayor Lane slipped in quietly near the back. Lila stayed home with Mia. I needed to focus. Mr. Kingsley sat smugly at the front table, flanked by 2 lawyers. He wore a navy blue suit and that same patronizing smirk I'd seen so many times. His team laid out their case first, filled with cherry-picked photos and out-of-context quotes. They painted me as disruptive, defiant, a political instigator trying to destabilize a peaceful community. Then it was my turn. Brianna stood beside me as I approached the podium. I took a deep breath. "I'd like to submit new evidence," I said, sliding a USB across the table. The tribunal chair, an older man with thick glasses, plugged it in. The screen lit up with documents, real estate transfers, fake business filings, court records from New Jersey. And then the photo. A mugshot. Jonathan Marks, aka Gregory Kingsley. There was a ripple of gasps throughout the room. "This man," I said slowly, "is not who he claims to be. He's a convicted felon. A known HOA scammer. And he has been using Willow Creek as his personal piggy bank." Kingsley shot to his feet. "This is outrageous. I demand that be struck from the record." The tribunal chair raised a hand. "You'll sit down, sir." Marlowe had been right. The moment was perfect. Brianna stepped forward and laid out everything: the embezzlement trail, the hidden Nevada company, the forged board signatures. She had printed copies for the tribunal members, and they read in stunned silence. One board member stood up and said, "I move for immediate removal of Mr. Kingsley from his position, pending a criminal investigation." Seconded, another said. It was unanimous. Just like that, Kingsley's world collapsed. His face turned white. He looked around, realizing for the first time that no one was standing with him. Even his lawyers backed away. But it wasn't over. Because just as he grabbed his briefcase to leave, two uniformed officers stepped into the room. "Jonathan Marks?" one of them asked. Kingsley froze. "You're under arrest for violation of parole and suspicion of fraud." The room exploded. People shouted. Neighbors cried out in disbelief. Reporters scrambled for cameras. I stood in shock as Kingsley Jonathan was handcuffed and led out of the building. When it was over, the tribunal chair turned to me. "Ms. Daniels, you are hereby cleared of all accusations. And on behalf of this board, I offer you our deepest apology." I didn't say anything. I just nodded, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. 2 days later, the mayor invited me and Lila to speak at the Clearwater Civic Summit. A week after that, the city formally disbanded the Willow Creek HOA. A new, community-led advisory board was formed, and they asked me to help lead it. And yes, I said yes. That summer, the Spring Unity Festival became an official city-recognized event. Not just in Willow Creek, but in parks across Clearwater. We called it the Ava Day celebration. Kids danced barefoot in the grass. Old neighbors brought new friends. Lila taught a girl from her school how to tie a head wrap. Mr. Delgado read another poem, and this time he ended it with a bow. And just as the sun dipped below the rooftops, a little girl ran up to me with a drum in her hand and asked, "Is this the neighborhood where you changed everything?" I bent down and smiled. "No, sweetie. We changed everything." And that's how my daughter and I turned a band celebration into a citywide movement, with the mayor by our side and the truth on our lawn. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing your ground can spark real change. And hey, if you've got your own crazy HOA story, drop it in the comments. We might feature it in an upcoming video. Until next time, stay proud, stay loud, and never let anyone tell you who you're allowed to be in your own home.